For those.
Sorry.
It's okay. We'll give people a couple minutes to arrive. Terry, while we're waiting, over Thanksgiving, I'm going to California. And we have a meeting on December 1st, which is Wednesday after Thanksgiving. And it was cheaper to fly back then. And so it's going to be hard for me to participate if you could take over that meeting.
Sure, I'll give it a go.
Okay, December 1st.
December 1st, okay.
Yeah, it'll be 4 a.m., which in California I'll be getting up, but for the flight, but
It might be a little difficult, yeah. Okay, yeah, no problem.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order. Is there any public comment? Is there any other business we need to attend to? That's not on the agenda. Okay, if not, let's take a look at the minutes of October 20th.
Can everyone see?
Yes.
Okay.
Melinda, this is just a small thing, but at the end of number 4, yeah, I think that I think Reed's the one that asked if Eric could go take a look independently at that site.
Oh, okay.
Yes, that's correct.
All right.
And I have not done that yet. Sorry about that.
Eric put a comment in the chat. He's having trouble with audio, Laura, but he doesn't have any comments on the minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, let me scroll on here.
Any comments, further comments about the minutes?
I'll move approval of the minutes.
Thank you, Reed.
I'll
Do I hear a
second.
second? Thank you. Was it Terry?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Terry. All right. I will, if Eric still is having problems with his audio, he had no problem with the minutes, so I will assume he is going to approve the minutes, Melinda.
He's here.
Everyone, oh, he's here, okay. Everyone who approves the minutes, signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the minutes have been accepted as amended.
And Laura, can you just confirm that you can hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you.
Excellent.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Laura.
All right, so we can move on.
Okay, so next are the two Trinity Baptist Church site reviews.
Is there anyone who would like to take us through this, or anyone who is on that would like to introduce it?
Yep, Brian Courier.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so the Trinity Baptist proposal's broken into two parts. Right here, it looks like we got the RZD portion. They own two lots that are split by zoning district in the RZD and the ARZD. So the RZD proposal includes a 58 unit condominium development, new public roadways with 2 access points on Mountain View. In addition to the residential development, there we go. The church is looking to add an addition, a gymnasium addition, a school addition, and 5 units of staff housing, and relocate their soccer field that's currently on the low side of their lot, where we're proposing some residential units. So we filed a pre-application with the town, and I believe our meeting is with the DRB is towards the end of November. But as you can see, we've done some preliminary investigation. We do know that there's some wetlands on the site. There's some small class 3s on the uphill side of our road. There's a class 2 wetland we know on the eastern side of the site. Associated with the stream, there's a wetland associated with that stream. We've identified steep slopes, and we feel that we've done a pretty good job trying to avoid as many natural features that exist on the site as we can. Currently today, it's some of it's mowed lawn. As I stated before, we're proposing development where the existing soccer field is. Some of it's hayed, but generally speaking, it's undeveloped, and we're not expecting to cut down a lot of trees in association with this development. But we know that there's a view shed driving east on Mountain View Road, looking towards the north. And that played a fairly good sized role in how our layout is on the low side of their site. We're trying to keep everything low to keep that view towards the north on Mountain View coming from the Industrial Ave intersection open. So if there's any questions or any clarifications that we could provide, we would be happy to do so.
Okay, does anyone have any comment while we have the site plan in front of us? We can come back to this when we look at the recommendations. If we want to go back to that also. All right. Yeah, why don't we just go ahead and go to the recommendations, Melinda?
Yeah, so in the narrative, I've noted that this is the parcel that is to the south of the Jacob parcel, you know, that the town acquired a few years ago. The Bittersweet common land is between it and the Jacob parcel, and the town has a trail easement through the Bittersweet open space currently. So the town has been working with the Winooski Valley Park District, who has been talking to the church about getting access from the church park, church property to Bittersweet via trail easement with some with a little, you know, trailhead parking area. So that being said, I've recommended that the applicant work with the town and the Winooski Valley Park District to provide public access and the trail connection to the existing easement to Bittersweet, which would then connect to the Jacob parcel. The second recommendation has to do with that the parcel itself, a portion of that parcel, just the easternmost side, is within the significant wildlife habitat area. And so that in compliance with Chapter 27, that habitat disturbance assessment be prepared by wildlife biologists and submitted by the applicant as part of their discretionary permit application. So then there's a recommendation about relocating one of the access drives. So Brian mentioned about the view shed and that had a role in determining where the access drives and development would be. But I've noted that this is the map showing the primary foreground view shed. So it's really just within this red area where that primary foreground is. And that's where, you know, some of the houses are, and this other access drive comes in with houses off of it. So it seems like the development, a lot of it is within that primary foreground view shed area. So that's why, part of the reason why the recommendation is there to relocate, and I'll go back to the site plan, to relocate this access drive over to the west, somewhere along the soccer field. That would also have the benefit of a secondary access for those who want to go to use the school facilities and the church, that all that traffic would be directed over here and not be going through this neighborhood. And we yeah, so that's that. And then, okay. And then the submitting a runoff and erosion control plan as part of discretionary permit, that's pretty standard. Development should utilize on-site stormwater infiltration to the greatest degree possible. And then if a wetland delineation hasn't been done in the last 5 years, to have one done for the discretionary permit application. And then number 7, proposed development must not encroach into the watershed protection buffers. The watershed protection buffers must be clearly demarcated on the site plan and on the ground to prevent future disturbance. And finally, the residential development should be clustered and some contiguous open space should be proposed as part of the project and shown on the site plan. So although there is no quantitative requirement for open space in the RZD, there is a statement that open space is, let's see, where is this? Proposed developments in the RZD must generally be consistent with Williston's goal of creating compact, walkable neighborhoods while conserving open space. So that's, those are all the recommendations.
Okay, can we just go start at number 1? And first of all, Brian, I know that the WVPD has said that the church has been more than willing to help provide an access to that bittersweet parcel. And I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Yep. So as I understand it, there's currently informal access to the northern parcel, and the church is, as you said, is agreeable to provide some kind of formal access. As we're showing the road layout currently, there's public right-of-way that takes you all the way to that northern cul-de-sac. So if we were to do an easement to the northern parcel, we would just have to look and see where the bittersweet easement starts and try and match it up as best as we can. Yeah, so there's public access all the way to that northern cul-de-sac. So we're discussing potentially maybe doing a parking lot on the western side of that main access road where we don't have any houses on the western side of the road as a potential parking area for a trailhead.
Melinda, can you point out that area with your pointer?
Yeah, so let me, I'm gonna go back to this, hold on a second, because I believe it shows it a little more clearly. Yeah, so this is the existing easement on the bittersweet parcel right here.
Okay.
And this was at least WVPD's original concept for a trail, would be kind of following this old maintenance road and then coming back. Obviously it may be now, coming out in a different place, or not sure, but that's kind of the concept right there.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was just to say that little maintenance loop actually comes all the way over on the other side of to right here on this side of where your pointer is. It loops all. So really, I mean, you would just move it slightly over here and it'd be right at the end of the cul-de-sac.
Okay.
All right. So our cul-de-sac is close to where it says the word "with" now.
Yeah.
Probably a little further southwest, but generally in that area, we'd come off the end of the cul-de-sac. It's going to be a dedicated road to the town, so the public would have rights to the sidewalk network on that road, which would then tie into a formal easement to the northeast corner of that lot.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you propose the trailhead and parking lot on this map?
So I don't think we're set in stone on where that would be located or the size. But currently we're thinking on the western side of the access road before you take the right turn on the cul-de-sac. If you want to pull up the site plan, it'd be across the street from units 38 through 40. There's a triplex, kind of where it says RZD district, 47 acres.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Yeah.
Somewhere in that opposite side, yeah, somewhere right around there is what we're thinking. So the regulations require us to do sidewalks on both sides of the road down that cul-de-sac road. So, you know, public road. So we feel that would be adequate. You know, it's less than 1,000 feet likely to the end of that cul-de-sac. So we feel that would be a pretty good spot.
So you would have the people that use the trail would be walking on the sidewalks to get up to the trail? Is that what you're
Correct.
suggesting?
Yep.
Which may be a potential problem for the people that are living along that street. Depending on how much trail walking traffic there is.
Yeah, I think it, you know, it's largely dependent on how much use, how big is the parking lot. You know, there's not too many houses on that road. It's a cul-de-sac, so we don't expect, you know, a lot of through traffic or anything like that. Obviously, the only people driving on that section of road are the residents who live there, essentially. So we feel like it'd be a pretty quiet street, and, you know, with sidewalks on both sides, you know, I don't feel it'd be too big of a burden, but, you know, that's something we can discuss, you know, as we move through the process.
Well, and that parking lot would also be very close to the church. Where on this map is the actual church parking lot for the parishioners that come to the church?
Yeah, right on the western edge where the cursor is right now. So that's the northern half, and obviously it's a pretty substantial parking lot. Billy, care to guess how many spaces you got there? Looks like probably over 100.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, you got to go this way. The parking lot's all the way over here. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that whole-
well, I'm sorry, yeah. But I think we have 200 parking spaces,
200, yeah.
roughly.
Yep.
Yeah,
sounds
because
about
you
right.
got school and church.
Right. How big of a parking lot do you think should be dedicated for this trailhead? How much use do you feel it gets now? And do you feel this connection would increase use? As we said, you know, there is informal access now. You know, would formalizing the connection and adding a trailhead parking lot increase the use significantly now, or how does the commission view this trail connection?
In my mind, it's similar in some ways to Mud Pond Conservation Area. And I imagine it would attract similar activity. And Melinda, I know we've had some monitoring of activity at different trailheads. Do you have a ballpark idea about how much traffic we might expect?
Well, I anticipate that it would be, you know, once a formal trail system has been established, that it would probably be used pretty heavily by the adjacent neighborhoods. I have no idea how much use it gets now. I think it's very informal, and really, you know, I think that people from Morgan Parkway and from those neighborhoods up in there probably get over there and use the trail on the parcel. I don't expect it would have a ton of use. I think probably, my guess would be maybe I don't know, 8 to 10 car parking lot would be adequate for that.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
are
that's-
other,
Sorry.
there's other informal points of access. But this would be, be great to have one formal point of access.
Do you think, Melinda, this will be limited to pedestrian use and not mountain bike? Because that would increase the use, I would think, if mountain bike trails were established over there.
I would guess that it would be restricted to pedestrian uses. I mean, it's such a small area. I think now there's like some ATV traffic over there, my guess is. But, I think that would partly be, that would be a policy recommendation that the Conservation Commission would probably need to look at and decide.
That would definitely increase the amount of folks like Mud Pond, if you're comparing it to Mud Pond. The mountain bike traffic adds a significant amount of folks over there.
Mm.
And I know that there are places where people can park at the end of cul-de-sacs to access trails. And I was wondering how people may be wanting to go to the end of your cul-de-sac to park there for the trailhead. And it's just something to be aware of. So I guess signage for that, making sure that people would park in the parking area if you don't want them at the end of the cul-de-sac. It is a public road, so I think people would have a right to park there if they wanted to. Is that correct?
I think that's up to how Public Works wants to set up the no parking ordinance. But we would have no problem erecting a, no parking sign at the end, or no public parking or something like that on the end of the cul-de-sac. And, they're going to go past the parking lot before they get to the cul-de-sac. So, if there's a few mishaps early on, I think that, that could get solved fairly quickly.
I do think it's important to try to anticipate potential conflicts, because especially, if a trail gets established after the development goes in, which, who knows, I'm sort of thinking of similar situations that we've had, like at Chatham Woods, when the trail got built after the development was done, and there was a lot of apprehension from the neighborhood about the trail. So I think it is important to kind of think through the, potential conflicts.
Laura, I just want to make sure you saw that Eric had posted a comment. He was unable to voice it.
Okay, thank you. I am wondering about whether the 200 parking space parking lot is still needed, and if the applicant considered citing some or all of the proposed development to the west of the current access road. I realize there are some class 3 wetland issues in there, but with mitigation measures that could happen elsewhere on the property, I would prefer to see the development clustered against the existing homes on parcels to the west of the property. This would address wildlife habitat and viewshed concerns, and potentially the existing parking lot could be accessed for residential use.
We have a church and a growing school, so no, we would not want to give up our parking lot.
If I may, Laura,
Yes,
are you open to having some of the existing parking lot be utilized for residential parking? If, for instance, if some of the condominium units were located where the current soccer field is mapped? Is that something you would be open to?
No, we wouldn't want to mix uses between the commercial and the residential application. We want to keep those separate.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think you've already got mixed uses putting so much housing on this
I agree.
church property. This is an awful lot of housing, I think. Can you do with less than 58 units and maybe
I agree 100%.
eliminate the housing that's the closest to Mountain View Road?
So looking at the maximum density for this RZD parcel, I have it calculated on the bottom right there, and we do make some assumptions with the river corridor area and, potential wetlands that aren't near where we're developing, but, the maximum density of this parcel is around 90 units. Obviously, when you take away the required square footages of the commercial property, it's a little bit less, but and that's multiplying by 3 units an acre. If we went to an affordability concept, we can get up to 5 units an acre. We're clustering the development, we feel, fairly significantly on the eastern side. And, the church is being left with a parcel that's about 30 acres. The residential parcel is only 20. So we feel we're doing as good a job as we can to separate the residential from the existing church now.
And I'm wondering if you could also address the second part of my question. I heard the response to my first question about the parking lot, which I don't really understand, but I'll let it go. But the second part of my question, I'd appreciate an answer to that. Thank you.
Can you reiterate your question, please?
Sure. I was just wondering if you considered locating the units to the west of your current access road, so that it's clustered up against the current housing that's on or accessed off of Route 2A, so that the development is all along the western, or as much of it as possible anyways, along the western side of the parcel. And that would address the view shed concerns, and also wildlife habitat and impacts to the wetlands and the unnamed tributaries that are along the eastern side of the parcel. Thank you.
Yep. So we'll definitely get a wildlife biologist to weigh in on, where and how much impact we're talking about for wildlife habitat. It is all similarly maintained field at this point. But as far as moving the access, I think that was one of the later conditions here, recommendations. The second access that now goes through the soccer field. Another thing we have to consider is how far that curb cut is from the Industrial Ave two-way intersection. That's a pretty main intersection. Mountain View, I believe, is posted at, is it 35 or 40? I believe the V-Trans standard for that speed limit to an intersection could be anywhere, somewhere between 400 and 500 feet. I don't know if we'll have enough area to site a curb cut that close to that main intersection, considering where the wetlands are on our site. So that's something we can look into, but I'm more worried about meeting the requirements for a curb cut that close to a fairly high speed intersection.
Right. Well, that's not my concern. That's Bruce Hoar's concern for Public Works. So I'm more concerned about the other elements that I mentioned, which is within the scope of this committee. And I don't know that, not an engineer, not a developer, but I'm just curious to know if it would be possible to reconsider that, especially that wing or whatever you call it at the north that's proposed for the northern end of the property that heads up to the northeast corner. All of those units could be located to move your soccer to, and I again, move, I'll just say it a third time, move as much of the housing as you can along the western side of the property. And it can be done without a curb cut, a second curb cut, great, and then you just have the one curb cut going into the whole parcel as it currently stands.
So I understand it's not under the Conservation Commission's purview, for other elements of this design. However, I can't say we can move them over there if another department's going to tell me I can't get a curb cut in that close. And I think having 3 curb cuts, isn't feasible on Mountain View Road. Public Works won't allow 3 curb cuts, but
Would you need another curb cut?
Yeah, I think Eric's saying still would only be 2 curb cuts. That's not for us to argue here. What we can do is put in the recommendations that if a curb cut is allowed farther to the west, that we recommend that those housing units be moved to the west. And that is in the recommendations if we want to take a look at that. And we could add further that housing could be possibly aligned along, I guess, kind of where the staff housing is now, I think Eric was saying, and along the houses to the west, and the soccer field could stay where it is. If we look back at the recommendations, we can see what the wording is for those.
I would say citing units to the west of the existing parking lot would not be something we're agreeable to. That's way too close. There's not enough area there. That's something that I don't think we would consider the west side of the parking lot. To the south of the parking lot where the soccer field is sited, the church wanted good access to that soccer field. They get pretty good turnouts. They wanted the parking lot to be close to that soccer field. The view shed, where exactly that lies on the plan, we can do an overlay, how far it is to the west of Trinity Drive, and, whether or not, we likely have to put a road through that in order to, maybe come up with a cul-de-sac layout that's totally up front. There's wetlands there, that we're worried about, getting approved from the town and the state, where on that northeast corner, we don't have those concerns. So, it's something we can consider as we move forward. As you said, it's something we have to decide now, I think we might be more impactful over there when we consider the layout as a whole. But, again, it's something we can look at.
Melinda, can we see the recommendations up on screen? I think it's recommendation 8 that you're referring to, Laura.
Yes. Yeah, and since we've been talking about that, I think we should possibly continue. Brian, have you thought about the open space that, while there isn't an amount of open space required, it is part of the town plan to have open space. And I was wondering if you had thought of that.
Yep. Yeah. And a lot of our open space is, associated with the stream river corridor. It's associated with steep slopes. It's associated with wetlands. Primarily a lot of our open space is conserving, natural features and keeping impacts away from those areas. Now, the church is on a 30-acre, parcel of remaining lands. And, potentially some of that could be pulled into the residential development if the DRB did require us to, provide a little more open space. So I think we have plenty of area to meet that, criteria, if that becomes something we need to address later on for sure. So.
Are any of these lines wetlands lines, wetlands or wetland buffers lines? I can't quite follow it on your map.
Yep. So there's one along Mountain View Road that goes under a culvert, and then there's another one to the north. Yep. And then there's another one to the north there. And then there's a fairly significant one to the east. That one is contiguous to the stream. So we're putting a 50-foot buffer on that one right off the get-go.
Now, what about just to the left of where the cursor is now, that half a donut loop? What's that?
That's a 50-foot wetland buffer.
Which one? Which line?
The further one. Yep.
What's the inner line? Is that?
That's the wetland delineated.
Okay, so you can't really change the configuration to a loop in that area. You're not.
Correct. Yep.
One thought I had is I was wondering whether, so say you moved this access road and, and wanted to retain as much of the houses along the access road. I was kind of wondering, if you'd have the room to do like a loop road in here instead of a cul-de-sac. And then, some of these houses could get, could sort of go along the road.
If you did that, maybe you could even eliminate that new curb cut and just retain a single curb cut. That would be.
Well, they need another access to meet the requirements of our bylaw. You can't have more than 40 houses off a single access.
Right. Correct.
So
yep.
Yeah.
Well, the solution to that is to reduce the number of houses.
Laura, I'd like to propose a change to one of the recommendations. If you could put that back up, Melinda, just in relation to Eric and Carl's comments. Recommendation 8, residential development should be clustered, and some contiguous open space should be proposed as part of the project shown on the site plan. Somehow I'd like for this also to reflect that the area on the western or southwestern corner is preferable from the Conservation Commission's perspective to avoid view shed and habitat impacts. I don't know how or where to put that, but Melinda, if you have a suggestion on how to format the recommendation well.
Yeah, I think number 3 also, that might be a better place. It says the proposed easternmost access drive should be located to the west. I mean, would it be better there? Or
yeah, either.
Could we look at that view shed map one more time?
Sure.
Quickly, I guess. So Trinity Drive obviously is essentially where the most western curb cut we're showing is. So in order to get to that western side, considering what I was talking about how close of a curb cut we can get to the industrial 2A intersection, we would have to build our road through that view shed. Even if it's a cul-de-sac or something along that side, where it's on the eastern side now, where the soccer field is, you can see that's not within the view shed. And that's something we were considering when we cited this.
Belinda, question about the view shed aspect. Roads through view sheds versus buildings in view sheds, is there a difference in the way they're addressed?
Well, I mean, not really, but to me, it's like, the way I sort of see it is that having buildings in the view shed is more intrusive than having a road go through the view shed. That's just my opinion.
I
I
agree.
would agree.
That's also where my head was. So for that reason, I don't know if you can put your cursor there, but just the left-hand edge of that red. Yes, right there is, if there were the second access were to come in there, or just barely into the view shed red there, it would allow a significant amount of space to the west for housing along that second access. So that's where I'm headed with the recommendations, that area to the west of the cursor is outside the view shed, is near existing residential use, and is far away from wetland and habitat impacts. So that's what I'm trying to address by.
Reed, where would you then put the soccer field? That's right where the soccer field is.
Yeah, so I would suggest leaving the soccer field where it is, down in the southeast corner.
If I could just comment to that, you actually are going to create a lot of traffic issues with soccer and your development and children getting to a soccer field in the middle of people walking.
Yeah.
So you got people driving into a subdivision, and you got students going to be traveling to a soccer field from our school, and you actually create a hazard for those children.
Yeah, those are
And I
things
think-
that will have to be weighed, but from the Conservation Commission's perspective and our recommendations for conserving our natural resources for the town, we're making our recommendations based on that, and the DRB is weighing our recommendations along with other considerations.
I mean, since the concept of, traffic and all that keeps coming up, and yes, it's outside of the scope, the town's gonna have to think about this anyway, because there's a lot of congestion at that intersection with 2A and Industrial Ave now, and this will add to that pretty significantly. So that's, just that whole area the town's gonna have to consider.
Yeah, and if we can't get a curb cut to Mountain View, if we did go to that southwest corner, then we're limited to 40 units off a single curb cut. So I think there's quite a few implications. We got to cross a few wetlands to get over there. And now we're splitting church property from the northwest corner and the southeast corner. Where's the parking going for that soccer field? I think you can tell we're not totally on board with the idea, but as you said,
Yeah.
it's something we can flush out with the DRB. So
Yeah, it's just something to think about.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
because we recommend
understood.
it doesn't mean it has to be. It's just what we view
Understood.
as being
Yep.
in our view, the best for the town's resources. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, I gotta say, where you propose the soccer field makes a lot more sense than keeping it where it is, just from an overall standpoint.
And you guys have a beautiful site for soccer. And talk about views for the audience.
Yes. Thank you.
And part of what we're trying to accomplish is have the church property clearly separated from the subdivision that would be there, that it's just a clear, this side's church, this is the subdivision. And it kind of keeps the two properties kind of clearly demarked instead of us crossing each other to have our students walking through the subdivision to go to a soccer game.
Yeah.
that-
Oh,
That makes sense to me. To me, it just leaves the major problem with this whole thing being too much housing close to Mountain View Road.
I'm kind of wondering myself if, if these are class 3 wetlands and they're just, of low functional value, it's possible that maybe some of this housing can be relocated to this side of the road, maybe.
Like shifting it down the road further from the entrance to get out of the view shed and
Yeah.
Yep.
In addition, if it's possible to make a loop out here. I don't know. Just a thought.
Yep, yeah, I think a loop would be tough on that plateau, but we can definitely look at maybe shifting some houses further down. I think it's gonna depend on whether the state calls those little pockets hydraulically connected to other pieces. We didn't get a classification on those. Wetlands, you know, that's something we're gonna deal with at the discretionary process, you know, so that might dictate how far we could shift units down that road. At the sketch plan level, we're just trying to avoid them. So, but if that's a possibility, we can definitely look into it.
My memory is a little fuzzy, but on this, but wasn't that whole area mowed lawn at one point? It wasn't until the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years that the church turned it into a brush hog field. That area between the soccer field and the current access road.
I believe so, but we are finding plenty of wetlands in mowed lawn or grass fields these days. So.
Yeah, we put a section of wildflowers in front, just diminished a little bit of what we mow.
Yep. Yeah, I remember
That's
noticing
great.
that and appreciating that.
Mhm.
Okay, can we go back to the recommendations, because we could possibly change the wording on a couple of the okay, let's see. If we go to number 8, you know, can we word that so that the residential development should be clustered, and some contiguous open space should be proposed as part of this project and shown on the site plan? And can we say there that this can be accomplished by moving the houses out of the view shed? Or do we need to put that with the view shed maybe? Which one is that?
I mean, you could also make a separate recommendation related to moving houses out of the view shed if you want to do that.
yeah, that's how I would recommend, Laura, have
Okay.
a separate recommendation talking about moving as much housing as possible out of the primary view shed.
Yeah, okay, let's, so a number 9 would be residential development should be moved out of the view shed and possibly along the road where on the western side of the main access road, where the class 3 wetlands are shown, if that is shown to be available for development. Something like that. And just a question about that. So then the development would be where the parking area would be for the trail easement. I know that I park a lot in Burlington at the end of Killarney Drive, which is a cul-de-sac, and that parking is kind of designated for people using the trail. That the bike path is right there, and I wondered if there's any way just to make that cul-de-sac the parking, if we do move houses up along that western side of the road.
On this map that's on the screen, where there's the white marker that's at the northeast corner, Melinda, and there's a little black line connecting it to the cul-de-sac. Yeah, right there, you could even just put spaces off of the cul-de-sac or something like that to allow people to park at the end and not walk past residential. That would be an example of how that might work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's just something to consider, because I know it seems very safe. And, you know, cars are driving slowly along that road in Burlington when we park there. So And there are no houses off the end of that cul-de-sac. So that could work really well and move the houses up. And then possibly even, fit more houses up into a loop there if possible. So away from the road and out of the view shed.
I am actually wondering if it might be more impactful to have people driving up that road to use the trailhead rather than parking down where, the place where it was like down here and walking up there, whether it be, just more impactful to have more cars up there. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I'm just wondering if we can move the houses up there and get them out of the view shed, that might just be a better place for it.
No, yeah, that's what I mean. I just mean in relationship to people parking
yeah.
on the trail.
And
Right.
you really want to see houses that close to the church building itself? That's on that, on that side of the road. That doesn't strike me as being a good plan either.
Okay, yep. Yeah, so maybe the parking area there is probably a good spot for it. All right.
I think the other thing to understand about the view shed is, driving east on Mountain View, looking to the northeast, there's 15, 20 feet of grade from Mountain View to where we're proposing the new public roadway. If they're 2-story houses, you might only see the top, 10 feet of them, just the roof line as you're looking out towards that direction. I think where the view shed is oriented on the comprehensive plan, I believe it's from Mountain View looking towards the northeast, and we have all the developments sited very low, on purpose. So just another thing to consider. Maybe a potential solution is moving both curb cuts, further to the east to get them even lower. We were trying to orient close to Trinity Drive as we could, but just another thing to consider. There might be another way to, reduce our impact on the view shed. So,
If the curb cut was moved to the east, would that run into the corridor, wildlife corridor?
Yep, that's what we'd have to delineate, figure out how close we can get to that edge. We're expecting a wetland buffer to come out, close to where the wood line is now, which will get fully delineated when we do our discretionary. But how far we can shift them to the east, at this point we don't know for sure. So, but just another idea.
Okay, we should probably go back to the recommendations and make sure that we have our thoughts in the recommendations. And we may want to let's just start at number 1, because we do want that easement. Do we need to say anything about a parking area in number 1, Melinda?
You could say something like the applicant should consider the best siting for any parking for that access.
Yeah, okay, yeah, let's put that in there.
There are many different ways that problem could be solved, so.
Right, so we'll leave it up to them. All right, so they know they need to do number 2, a habitat disturbance assessment. So we talked about the proposed easternmost access drive located to the west. Do we still agree with that? Or do we think that it's better to see if we can get the houses up out of the view shed a different way? Because that does seem like a good place for that soccer field, since it's right next to the parking and near the school.
So Laura, my thought in that is not necessarily to have houses along this access road, but to just have the access road go like here and then around and then that way, and then take this one out And then these houses could either kind of go there or kind of, I don't know, somehow be moved out of the view shed. Not, yeah, anyway.
Sorry, I have a couple of questions for you on that, Melinda. One, would these roads ultimately become town-owned roads?
Correct.
So, in that proposal you were just describing, Melinda, what would the possibility be of just using Marion's Way as the curb cut, and then
Well, that's
somehow the
kind of
town
what
takes over Marion's Way?
Yeah, I kind of wondered about that, whether it might be possible to utilize this curb cut and even, you know, and even like give this, I don't know, it might be a little more complicated than anybody
Right.
wants to do, but yeah, if there's some way of utilizing this curb cut and then kind of, you know, sort of pulling this off here, either going up that way or going up this way. You know, that could, I don't know, that's just something I thought.
So Marion's Way is a private driveway for those units. You know, we would have to work with that association. It's closer to the intersection. And Public Works has a very strict standard for right-of-way requirements, road widths, curbs, green belts, sidewalks. You know, and to put that through an existing parking lot, a 64-foot right-of-way, you know, would just eliminate the entire parking lot. So I don't believe that's something we could consider at this time.
I mean, yeah, and I wouldn't say like necessarily take up some of the parking, but maybe bring it up alongside, but separated from the parking. And you probably
Yes.
lose a few spaces here if you come through, but
Then we'd have to meet setback requirements to the commercial buildings, and it's an awful lot of road to build and for the town to maintain in the future. So, and again, another primary concern is how close that curb cut is to that intersection to the west.
yeah.
Well,
You know-
also you're directing cars possibly up through an area where there's a school and crossing over.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, presumably that access would really be for the school and the church. And the other side would be for the residential area. That's kind of was my idea about that. And that it would still meet the requirement for 2 points of access for a residential area. But
Oh,
would-
that makes sense.
You know,
So that road would go to the parking lot, basically.
right. So, you know, so you could have access for the church and school over here and access to the residential area over here.
Mhm.
And to get, you know, more than 4 units, we need 2 points of access. And, you know, I don't believe Public Works would allow 3 curb cuts on Mountain View where only 1 exists today. I think probably 2 is our max.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But to connect the, you know, the public road development on the east to the now, you know, public road to the west, it would all have to be built to public works standards for them to accept it. And, you know, I think building that much road, you know, is very inefficient, cost prohibitive. And, you know, it's a lot more for the town to maintain. And it's just something that, you know, we couldn't be supportive of at this point.
mhm.
Can we look back at that recommendation that we were talking about?
It goes number 3.
It seems as though the important part here is that we want to reduce impacts to the view shed. And
Mhm.
one suggested way of doing that is to consider a secondary access to the west rather than adding it to the east of the existing access. So maybe the recommendation just needs to be flipped around to say to reduce impacts to the view shed, alternate locations for a secondary access should be considered, such as to the west.
Yeah, I like that, Reed. Let's just, yeah.
Can I just, can I just make a point to the Conservation Commission members? So yes, view shed is important, and we benefit from the fact that that's already been mapped out and likely is not going to change. But as you know, we have in one of these recommendations, the second one, there is the potential for habitat impacts as well. We just don't know what those are yet because they haven't been, that assessment has not yet been done. But if you look at, you know, I don't know if you can do this quickly, Melinda, but if you pull up Google Maps and just look at this parcel from bird's eye perspective, 10,000 feet or whatever, there is potential for impact to wildlife there. There's this whole green space to the east and north from this parcel all the way over to Redmond Road and then up to the Winooski River that wildlife currently have access to. And then there's that unnamed stream to the east of the parcel. So there is the potential for wildlife. The extent to which that is, we don't know because that assessment hasn't been done yet. The viewshed map has been done, so we can say definitively that there is an impact, but we just don't know that yet with the wildlife impacts.
Mhm.
So I guess my point is I'm hesitant to put so much weight on viewshed without really being able to consider the wildlife impacts yet. That's what I want to share.
I just want to chime in and say I agree with that, Eric. I don't want to pit them against each other, but it seems like choosing view shed over what could be important habitat is not something that I'm comfortable with.
Okay, so let's go back to the recommendations and take a look at number 3. Okay, so let's see, Kim or Eric, what do you think? How should we reword number 3 to make sure that the view shed isn't the primary mover for how to relocate houses?
You could just, if you want to scrap that recommendation, if you think that it adds complexity that is counterproductive, you could scrap it. Number 8 does say the residential development should be clustered. I don't know.
Can you scroll down? I can't see, or I can pull it up on the link, but will you scroll down for just, to 8?
What if viewshed was mentioned in 8 and we scrapped number 3? Something like residential development should be clustered and should avoid primary viewshed area where possible and
Yeah.
some contiguous space.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I like the where possible because then that means that significant wildlife habitat corridor could take precedence over that.
You could even outright say that, Eric and Kim, would you like language that says habitat disturbance should take precedence over viewshed impacts?
I was just wondering, I was going to ask Eric that, but that seems like something that we should maybe have a broader conversation about, like a policy, maybe that we recommend that always. And I don't want to like put it in here as if it's a policy that we haven't had agreement on yet. What do you think, Eric?
Yeah, thanks, Kim. I was going to say the exact same thing. I actually, I was thinking about that coming into this meeting too. For this recommendation today, Reed, I liked what you proposed. I would just add the caveat around habitat disturbance. You know, if again, this is the problem here is we have the view shed mapped out, that's set, but we don't have the habitat assessment done yet. So it's hard because we don't know what will come back from the habitat assessment. So I guess my suggestion would be to use the language that we just proposed. I don't know if you captured that, Melinda, but add in after habitat disturbance assessment, add in something like if the results of the assessment determine there are impacts to habitat or wildlife habitat or something like that.
Yeah, I think I get the gist of what you're talking about. But so basically, number 8, residential development should be clustered to avoid impacts to the view shed, or to avoid impacts to view shed, residential development should be clustered. Some contiguous open space should be proposed. Maybe, you know, I don't know. I'm sort of seeing those as 2 different things.
Yeah, I agree. It really is 2 different thoughts. One is clustering to avoid impact to contiguous space, and one is locating so as to avoid view shed impact where possible.
It could be something as simple as, you know, we leave them in there as they are, but then somewhere else, maybe in the view shed one, we have we add a caveat that protection of wildlife habitat, if needed, should take precedent over protection of view shed.
Okay, so in number 3.
Yeah, yes, I think that's
over
what
there.
you're saying. Yeah.
But we were going to eliminate number 3.
I think, how about changing it to what Laura suggested earlier, to reduce the impacts to the view shed, alternate access should be considered. Alternate access and relocation of infrastructure should be considered.
Yeah, and then that, yeah,
Habitat disturbance should take precedence over view shed,
yeah, that sounds great to me.
or something like that.
Is everyone okay with that? All right,
Yeah.
yeah, and we can let Melinda word that.
Yep. And just so I'm clear on the process, the one of the next steps will be to get that habitat disturbance assessment done, correct? Before it comes back to us again.
Yes.
Okay. All right, and so let's move on. The applicant is going to submit a professionally prepared runoff and erosion control plan. Then 5, development should utilize on-site stormwater infiltration design. Anybody can stop me if they have something. It just seems like this is, these are things that are important that will be done. And a wetland delineation for the proposed development must be prepared. And that will also show where the wetlands are on the property. Brian, that hasn't been done yet, correct?
Partially, but yeah, it will be fully vetted by the state before we go on to discretionary. Yep.
Okay, great. So proposed development must not encroach into watershed protection buffer. Watershed protection buffers must be clearly demarcated on the site plan and on the ground to prevent future disturbance. All right, and then we already have 8, and none of this runs into any watershed protection buffers. Is that correct, Brian?
That's correct. Yep. We should have had a buffer associated with the stream, but we don't. So that's something we can add.
Okay. All right.
Just sorry, a question for Melinda. Up on finding number 4, the proposed developments categorized as higher risk development. Is that, I'm just not remembering what that, does that have anything special added to it other than just serving as a flag that it's higher risk development?
So that, let me just go back up to this. Yeah, so it sort of explains it in the narrative. The proposed development falls within the category of higher risk development because the amount of land disturbance will exceed 2 acres, because some disturbance may occur within watershed protection buffers. So that just means that's the finding, and the recommendation that goes with it is the requirement for an erosion prevention sediment control plan, sediment prevention.
Thanks.
Erosion control and sediment for.
Yes, got it. ESPC plan. Yep, got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Does anyone have anything further on the recommendations?
I'll move approval of the recommendations as amended.
Thank you, Reed. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Kim. Is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of approving the recommendations as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Is there anyone that is abstaining?
I abstain.
Okay,
Too
thank
many- Too many loose ends on the wording for me.
All right, thank you, Carl. Okay, so those recommendations have been approved as amended. And so now I think we move on to the other parcel that Trinity is developing. Is that right on the agenda?
Yep,
Yes.
correct. Yep.
Okay.
Planning and zoning wanted us to split it into 2 different applications. They're 2 different parcels and 2 different zoning districts, so.
All right, Brian, go ahead and tell us about this one.
Okay, so this one's much simpler. It's in the ARZD district. It's under 10 acres, so we're not required for the, I believe it's 75% open space requirement. There's one existing home on this just under 9-acre parcel. We haven't decided whether or not that single family home is going to stay or not. It's currently a double wide trailer. We'll make that determination further on in the process, but what we're proposing here is essentially a 3-lot subdivision served off a private drive, which has a curb cut on Mountain View Road. So we're avoiding the main tributary to the west. There's a little finger going to the northeast. We expect a wetland to be located somewhere on the northern section of that parcel. We weren't able to get that delineated for our sketch plan, but we are anticipating some wetland associated with that tributary to the north. So we're clustering everything as best as we can while keeping the character of the ARZD to the southern portion of this parcel. So yeah, all lots will be served off a shared private drive in this much smaller development outside of the sewer core area.
How many units did you say would be in there?
There's one existing single family home, but it will end up being a 3-lot subdivision. So it'll be 3 building lots. Whether or not the existing single family home stays or not, we'll determine later on, but it's a 3-lot subdivision.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And the cleared area is what is in yellow, correct?
What is in yellow is the proposed building envelopes.
The building.
So
envelope.
it would be clear depending upon how the building is sited within that envelope.
Okay.
Are those usually half-acre envelopes?
So lot 2 is like 1.3 acres, so that envelope is, looks like it's about half the area, so it's probably around 0.75 acres, 3/4. And the northern one, that parcel is about 5 acres, so that building envelope's probably around the same 3/4 acre area there.
Mhm.
One thing I noticed, Brian and Billy, that will come up in the DRB hearing in my staff report is that the lots 1 and 2 are not compliant. The proposed acreage is not compliant with our regulations because the minimum lot size would be 1.84 acres, just FYI.
Okay, yeah, we can adjust the proposed, there's plenty of acreage there, so I guess it's just how we shake it out. Yep, understood, thank you.
Any other questions on the site plan itself before we go to the recommendations?
So is this is definitely in the wildlife corridor habitat?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is where the building envelopes are kind of pushed over towards. I just wonder if there would be a way to pull the building envelopes closer to the road that will be accessing the homes.
Yep, that's something we can consider for sure. Yep.
Mhm. Okay, we could put that in the recommendations as well. Let's take a look at the recommendations, Melinda. Okay, a habitat disturbance assessment should be prepared. So that is something that you're also going to do here, probably at the same time as with your other lot. Limit extent of forest clearing to the degree possible to reduce impacts to significant wildlife habitat area. So, Terry, I think this is, I guess where, if they needed to, they would move the area of clearing away from that.
I
Do we
think number 2 should be either amended or a number 3 should be inserted addressing citing of building envelopes to further to the east to avoid encroachment on the SWHA.
Okay,
I abbreviate only because I can never pronounce it properly.
so maybe add to no structures or forest clearing shall be allowed outside the building envelopes. The building envelopes should be positioned as far to the east to avoid significant wildlife habitat corridor as possible. Is that?
Yes, what you said, Laura.
Yeah, okay. I'm just waiting for Melinda to get that.
Yep, got it.
Okay. The discretionary permit application shall be accompanied by a completed runoff and erosion control checklist that shows how the applicant will comply with the guidance provided in the current edition of Vermont's low-risk site handbook for erosion prevention and erosion control. Low-risk development must also comply with the standards outlined in WDB 29.5.1 and 29.5.9 through 12. Okay, so that is something that needs to happen. Okay, 5, a wetland delineation for the proposed development must be prepared by a professional wetland scientist, and the site plan submitted with a discretionary permit application shall show all wetlands on the property. And 6, proposed development must not encroach into watershed protection buffers, Watershed protection buffers must be clearly demarcated on the site plan and on the ground to prevent future disturbances. So those recommendations seem pretty straightforward. Does anyone have any proposed changes to any of those recommendations?
So when they're doing the wildlife, significant wildlife habitat assessment, this should be in conjunction with the previous development instead of independently, because they're so close together that this is going to have a bigger impact, that two areas are going to be developed as opposed to just one.
Yes,
It is
exactly,
one way.
Terry, and both along that same stream corridor as well,
Right.
either side
I
of it.
mean, yeah, to me, it makes sense too, to like, so you're saying do a single HDA and submit them for both and do the single HDA so it covers the entire area. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, because if they were done independently, it might not seem as big as an impact as if you look at the whole, both of the projects at the same time, where it would be more of an impact to have that, added disturbance of this 3-lot subdivision as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, we can put that in number 1, I would think. A habitat disturbance assessment should be prepared by a qualified wildlife biologist in conjunction with the discretionary permit application for whatever the number is or what it's called for the other parcel for Trinity.
I'm assuming both these projects will happen at the same time.
No, the growth management process for the RZD versus the ARZD are very, very different. So we would expect if we don't hit any snags, that the ARZD would be available to happen well before the RZD.
Laura, you're muted.
Thanks. I muted myself rather than unmuting myself. Brian, do you have any problem doing an HDA for both parcels at the same time?
I don't think so. I think, there's definitely some savings in doing them both at the same time, from our perspective as well. And, better to see if any issues arise, sooner rather than later. So I don't see a big issue with doing the HDAs at the same time.
And
Okay.
presumably the same would be for the wetland assessments.
Yep, that's fine.
Yep, can we put that in there also, Melinda?
Actually, could we, on the wetland piece, considering the delineations are only good for 5 years, I would hate to do the RZD section, if we're stuck in growth management for a few years, I'd hate to see those have to get redelineated if we're up against that 5-year threshold. If it's possible, could we leave those separate? I don't really think that, we shouldn't be having any wetland impacts on the ARZD and very minimal on the RCD sections. I don't necessarily see why those should be looped together. And again, it's just the timing piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, whenever you're adding impervious surface, you're gonna be impacting to some extent with the assessment to provide a better understanding of how.
Yeah, and we're not saying that it shouldn't be done. It's just they expire, so it's just it's a timing thing is all.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm just pointing out that whenever you're developing a parcel that's not developed, there's going to be.
Yep.
All right, so we're going to leave that as is, correct, Eric?
Number 5.
Sorry, for 5?
Yeah.
Yep, that's fine.
All right. That was a good point, Brian. Thank you. Are there any further comments on any of these recommendations?
I have a question on the envelope, building envelope of a half an acre. If Melinda mentioned that the size of the lots would need to be tweaked a little bit because of the necessary acreage, is that going to push lot number 3 further up into the woods, and where would there need to be clearing? Or is it such a minimal, small amount of acreage?
I think what we could do is the lot line between 2 and 3. Right now, it's just a straight line between that little jut out of the exterior lot line on the northwestern side, yet the opposite side. I think likely we would move that line somewhere to the north to make lot 2 an appropriate size for the district. So it effectively would have very little to no impact on the layout. And then we'd probably look to move the western end of both of those envelopes towards the east to get under a half acre and stay out of that significant wildlife area.
Melinda, did you say lot number 1 needed to be increased as well?
Lots number 1 and number 2 need to be, but it is very small. It's a very small
Right.
amount.
So
Yeah.
it wouldn't move lot number 3's envelope into the woods and requiring more clearing?
We would try not to do that. Yeah, that would be our goal, is to adjust the lot lines so the envelopes don't impact any further to the north. I believe we can make that happen.
All right,
Our-
anything?
our-
further?
Our surveyor just won't like putting a few extra property corners in, but that's fine.
Mhm.
And that, I wasn't gonna bring this up, but this, everything that the proposed, I'm fine with, but Melinda, this just kind of raises a flag with me for the town for this, for that. Maybe there needs to be some flexibility in that bylaw, because in situations like this, when you could end up with just oddly shaped parcels that just make for headaches down the road. So it's just something that maybe we should talk about.
Yeah, certainly.
Not for this project, but just.
Yeah, no, I understand. I can make a note of that.
If no one has anything further on these recommendations, and if Brian, you don't have anything further, is there a motion to approve the recommendations as amended?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Sure, I'll second this one.
Okay, Eric. All those in favor of accepting the recommendations for this Trinity parcel as amended, signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? And does anyone abstain? Okay, the recommendations have been approved for this particular Trinity parcel. Thank you for your presentation, Brian.
Thank you for having us.
All right, it looks like we're almost on time. So let's go ahead to the staff report on the Trails Grants update.
Yeah. So the Fellowship of the Wheel was invited to submit a full application for their adaptive, sort of developing an adaptive beginners trail at Mud Pond Country Park, or just making improvements to that trail. So it's beginner friendly, adaptive friendly. And so they've asked us for a letter of recommendation, as well as some matching funds. And I just wanted to, kind of ask your approval for that, for supporting that project.
Melinda, can you remind me, you had asked me a while ago if I would help with that full proposal, and is that as part of, like, on behalf of Conservation Commission? And if yes, do we need to talk about that in this conversation, or is that separate, like not on behalf of Conservation Commission?
I can't remember. Did I ask you for this? I guess I did. I can't remember whether it was this or whether it was the Catamount
This one.
signage. But yeah.
Well, actually, it might have been both. You
Okay.
mentioned both of them. I just wanted to understand if it was like on behalf of Conservation Commission or separate, and if it's on behalf, do we need to talk to the rest of the members about it?
It may have been on behalf of Conservation Commission. And, I mean, basically it would just be, does the Conservation Commission want to collaborate in this project? I mean, there's, I guess, writing a letter of support is sort of aside. Apart from that, the Conservation Commission could choose to write a letter of have me write a letter of support on your behalf and submit it with the application. Additional to that, you could decide that you want to be more integrated into the project and be a part of the project team. I'm not sure whether that was as necessary with these URSA grants as it was for the VORIC grant, but I guess it's still a question whether you want to have that level of involvement in this, or whether you would like him to be a part of the project team on your behalf.
I would be excited about the idea if you're willing, Kim, to have Kim represent the Conservation Commission on the project.
I agree.
I'm happy to do it. I'll just specifically think about like how much time I have, and then I'll just be really clear with you and Adam.
Yeah.
and Linda.
Yeah, I mean, I think really what's going to amount to is, maybe reviewing their application and submitting some feedback on their application.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Answering questions if they want to know if something should be reviewed by the Conservation Commission or not.
Mhm.
Can you just remind me what the scope of the project was?
Yeah, so they're gonna take an existing loop at the Mud Pond Country Park and construct some improvements, mainly to, I think, about a dozen bridges, make them a little bit wider and more adaptive, user-friendly. And also there were certain points in the trail that were that needed some improvements to make, a little bit wider for I don't know what you call those.
Adaptive mountain bikes.
Thank you. Yes, for adaptive mountain bikes. And it wasn't creating any new trails anywhere or anything like that. It was simply using the existing trails and just making those improvements on them.
I think my perspective on it is that it's really critical for accessibility and equity issues, right? Like the only adaptive mountain bike trails that I can think of in Chittenden County are at Catamount, and they're really the carriage roads. And so if we think about folks who don't have the use of their legs and their ability to get out in the woods and enjoy natural spaces, we don't really offer places like that are accessible to that community. And I feel it gets beholden on us to take steps to make our natural areas more accessible. So for me, this like checks a big equity box, and that's, I don't know if that like helps you contextualize it a little bit, Terry, but like that's why I see it as really critical, or as why I see it as like a really worthy project.
Right, yeah. And one thing that's related and not in a sense isn't part of the grant probably is parking. And I know that's a big to do around over there at Mud Pond. And I am on that road all the time in and out. And it's kind of scary sometimes when you're getting people coming across the road going to the biking side. And if you have somebody in an adaptive bike that's kind of low to the ground, when you're coming around that corner, it's really hard to see. And there's no signage at all on that whole stretch of South Road that says that there's people crossing. And my thought is that, if there could just be a really small parking lot for like 3 spaces that was only for people with adaptive bikes. That would
Terry, I
really,
think if you go back and read I have to go bring Nico to Audubon in like 1 minute, but I think Melinda was not at this meeting and I can't remember if Terry was, but I think if you go back and look at the meeting minutes from when Adam came, we had like, I'm going to say a 30 to 40 minute discussion just about the issue of parking and adaptive bikes. And we did talk about signage, and Matt was chairing the meeting staffing the meeting that day because Melinda was out of town. And we talked about like the need for handicap spots. Like that lot is beholden to all of the handicap compliance. So that there was I don't remember if you were there actually, maybe.
I was, but I'm thinking about a parking lot on the country park side of the road. Because
so I think Matt weighed in and said that like we would need to have handicap spots, and that signage, like adding signage about like bike crossing, and Adam like totally weighed in on like there are already adaptive mountain bikers using that and crossing that road. It's just that the trails aren't great for them. And anyway, I think there's like a long I mean, I don't know how detailed. I think Melinda takes more detailed notes than that. So maybe it doesn't seem like a long conversation, but.
Yeah. And to Kim's point, we have looked extensively at parking and the feasibility of developing more parking, and found that it really isn't feasible. So we kind of have to work with what we have today for parking.
And just not to have a designated spot for parking for only adaptive folks,
we can do that in the existing parking lot. We can have a ADA
in fact
spot
we
there.
have to legally, I think. Was Matt's point. I have to go run to bring Nico to Audubon, but I guess I really support this project, as I think I've made clear, and I'm happy to help with it as much as I am able, given my time.
Lack of time. Yeah.
My lack of time. Okay. I'll thank you all. See you later.
Thanks, Kim.
Bye.
All right. And what was the funding, Melinda, that they were asking for?
So they were, I think they were asking for something like $68,000 of funding from the grant.
Okay.
And so they're looking for matching funds, but I'm not sure how much we could offer. Maybe $1,000 or something in that around there, but
and why do you think we can't offer more than that?
Just based on what's in our budget and what our current needs are for maintenance. I mean, I can take a closer look at the budget.
I'm sorry, what's the total ask?
Their costs are about, the project cost is estimated at $80,000, and that actually is not just Mud Pond Country Park. That includes the work that they're doing in another place, Saxons. They're doing this project at Saxons. They've been raising money and they've got committed matching funds from, I think from the town of Essex and from other people. So the grant funding they're asking for is around 68,000. So they've come up with 12,000 in committed matching funds.
They have 12,000 already.
I believe so, in committed funding. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure if it was Laura or Terry who just said that, but yeah, if we can contribute more than 1,000, it'll probably make the application a little bit stronger, especially if it's just a
Definitely.
from Williston.
Mm. Is that something that can come out of the ERF instead of the budget?
No.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, it's not acquisition.
Okay, all right.
I mean, does anybody have sort of a number that you think would be good to contribute if we could?
Do you know roughly what the Williston share of the grant would be?
That I don't know. I could find out.
Yeah, I think it would be wise for it to be sort of proportional to how much is being done in Williston.
Mhm.
If you could find, is there time for you to find that out and for us to show support at the next meeting, or do you feel like they need it to move forward immediately?
There might be time. Yeah, there might be. I can't remember when their application is due. It might be like towards the end of November, early December.
Mhm.
It sounds like there's general support, and the question is more about how much funding we would be able to provide.
Yeah.
And it could also, it doesn't have to be, from my perspective anyway, it doesn't have to be cash. It could be in kind somehow as well.
Yeah, and a lot of their $12,000 or whatever it is in kind, not cash match. So they're counting like their
Labor.
volunteer hours and all that other stuff in that. Yeah.
Melinda, I looked back at my notes and I think November 15th is when their grant is due.
That got pushed back because
Oh, it did.
yeah, because the
Okay.
state process was a little bit slower than anticipated.
Oh, good. All right.
I just need to find out when the new due date is.
Okay. Okay. All right, thank you for doing that.
Yeah, if there's no other questions about this item, I just wanted to give you an update about the Vermont State Police Barracks project. So they have indicated that they're totally open and willing to provide a trail easement as long as it doesn't interfere with their operations there. So I just, I guess I would suggest maybe perhaps myself and anybody who's interested do a site walk there, kind of trying to determine a possible trail alignment. It's going to be quite a bit of walking because their parcel is really big and it stretches from South Brownell Road all the way over to Route 2A. So, it's going to be a pretty rugged walk, but if anybody else is interested in kind of participating in that, let me know.
I'm interested, Melinda. I'd be happy to walk
Mhm.
that with you on behalf of the commission.
I'd come along too if you.
Yeah, I would too, actually. So just let us know when it is. And
Yeah. All right, well, we can figure out a day and a time to do that.
Would that probably be going, through the public parking access and then to the back of the parcel and up?
What public parking access are you? Oh,
The park and ride. the potential future park and ride?
Yeah, it would be, so the trail alignment will probably end up somewhere on that access road, and then a short hop over to a crosswalk and sidewalk. And then, basically you'd be on Route 2A. That's kind of the idea. And then there's potentially in the future an opportunity to connect to Hurricane Lane and then go back in there through some other trail easements. But that's like, all of this is kind of, in terms of being actually implemented and constructed, it's I would say it's in the future sometime, but getting the easement, I think it'd be important for us to do that while they're of the mindset to do that.
Yep, and when we can get easements, we want to, because we need a collection of easements to make a connection possible.
Yeah. Yep. So, it's going to be challenging. This one is because the most of their parcel that's not being developed is very wet. So it's going to be a challenge to try to find an alignment that, is not too steep, but still avoids wetlands as much as possible. But for the site walk, I would expect to get your feet wet, definitely. So. All right.
That reminds me, on the site walk, I don't know if I was supposed to do that walk off of Redmond Road. I left last meeting thinking I was going to do it on my own, and then I saw in the minutes that I was going to do it with Laura, and I were going to do it. So I feel a little bit better for having not done it yet.
You know what? I haven't done it either, Eric, and I don't think we were supposed to do it together, though we can. I think we were just gonna stop whenever the next time we go to the landfill is.
Yes, I haven't been yet.
Yeah, I need to get there for sure, but just separately we can do that.
All right, perfect. Thanks.
All right, I kind of, we're still like, we keep sort of delaying the annual report, but pretty soon it is actually going to be due. So, I've been guilty of this as well, of just sort of like ignoring, trying to wrap that up. I can't say that I've done anything to it since the last time we've talked about it. But I guess I'll just, I'm a little bit afraid.
Pull it up. I don't think we're that far away.
No, it doesn't. Yeah. Okay.
And I've got one thing that we need to add to paragraph 2, if you could show that, Linda.
Yeah. This one.
Yeah, in the middle. Let's see now. Oh, toward the end, it says, during FY21, the Conservation Commission reviewed one administrative permit application, and then there should be a number by pre-apps.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I will need to, let me just put a placeholder in there and highlight this. Yep.
I don't know how you catch these things, Carl. You have like special software for scanning.
Looks like, Laura, you did the EAB part. And Allenbrook water quality. Okay.
Yep, and I did SWHA mapping updates.
Yeah, great.
I need your once read through to make sure it's consistent, because I know you were also going through this same topic and putting together the story map. So I want to make sure that everything seems to align, but I took a stab at it.
Yeah. And then we've got a few other things, but honestly, the report is getting pretty long, so I'm not really even sure if we're gonna have even room for that other stuff, to be honest. You could
almost just mention that we did desired trails prioritization.
Yeah.
And leave it at that.
Yeah.
Man, that was such a, oh no, that was something else. Never mind. Do they still print this in hard copy?
They do. Yeah, I mean, usually we're like sort of limited to 2 pages, so we may have to condense some of this. And it's nice also to have a photo or two to
Yeah,
include.
I was
But
gonna say, we don't have any photos in here yet, and that's honestly, I think that's what gathers the most attention
yes,
from town folk. So we would do well to
yeah,
shorten up some text and add in some photographs.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm wondering if for the, I don't have a document open, so I can't scroll up, but I think you in the state wildlife habitat area, I wonder if you could do like a map or something instead of the, you know, the areas that are highlighted, that instead of a photo.
Yeah,
Yeah, or even if it's very small, the SWHA proposed map change,
yeah,
you could show that. And, you know, it's a big deal that we had a part-time trail steward for the first time this year. So I don't know if we want to get a picture in there.
oh, yeah,
And
Do I
that
have-
was the big deal.
yeah.
Even if you need her to come in and pose.
Stand in front of a
Yeah,
sign.
give her the weed wrench and take a photo.
Yeah, darn it. Right.
Melinda, is this also online, the town report?
It is online, and they also produce a hard copy.
So online, could you add links, or it has to be exactly what's in the printed version?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe.
Hmm.
I'm not sure whether they allow us to have links in there or not. But I'll ask.
Could also include a picture of Jude, if she's willing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I
Great point,
saw a picture of her in another newsletter recently.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
I did too.
Historical Society or
Volunteering,
something.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well. Good.
I hope that makes you feel better, Melinda. We're not, we have a lot of progress on it.
Yeah, it does make me feel better.
Maybe
Thank you.
maybe we should put this at the top of the next agenda, so we just knock it out and get it done without having to
There
wait,
you
go.
know, when we're at the end of our 2 hours and
Yeah.
already slightly brain dead.
That's probably a good idea. And we'll do that.
For future meetings, I know I've already loaded you up with a couple ideas, Linda, but just thoughts coming out of this one
Yeah.
today. I do think it would be good to have a conversation about how we balance viewshed and wildlife habitat
Yeah.
quality. And don't really
I
know
do
how
remember
to-
that.
Go ahead, Terry.
Oh, I do remember I was at one meeting and it might have been the DRB or planning, and they said viewshed is pretty far down on the list of importance when they're
At the
weighing.
At the DRB.
It might have been DRB or planning, one or the other, but they said that on the scoring, there was a score sheet and
Mhm.
that the viewshed usually was down towards the bottom.
Yeah.
And like you said, as opposed to wildlife habitat.
I think maybe what you're referring to is when we did the ERF prioritization and you all did the survey where you were trying to.
The weighting.
The weighting survey. I think viewshed was down near the bottom.
Certainly for Conservation Commission, that was our tendency to prioritize it lower.
Yeah, but that's I think it would be a good exercise to actually do a formal, develop a formal policy on the prioritization of conservation area resources. Because we are often faced with these choices of, do you impact this resource or do you impact this resource? Which one is more important?
Yeah.
So,
And this is kind of fuzzy in my memory, but I remember reading once some research that someone at UVM School of Natural Resources was doing that basically concluded that from a wildlife and wildlife perspective, it's better to cluster your housing developments together, even on adjacent parcels, and then leave that open space. And that often can mean clustering them up against the road, which obviously would impact the viewshed.
Yeah,
Yeah, the applicant also made a point that there was a dip in the elevation and that, you know, the houses would be kind of sunk down a little bit. And is there a way, I know at one review that someone mentioned that there could be a something done on the computer where it could show what the
Street-
view shed, right, what it would look like.
Yeah, and
rendering,
Street View
Yeah.
can help.
Yeah,
right, although it's a little distorted. You know, I know for the BGS project, they actually submitted a GIF of a rendering of the project from I-89 as you're driving along I-89. So maybe they could do a similar thing for this, just submit some kind of rendering.
right, and that would help us, so we wouldn't have to spend so much time on, oh, you know, the
Yeah,
view shed is being compromised and.
Yeah, what's that elevation of the tops of those roofs, basically?
Right.
As you, yeah, if you put that guy right at the current entrance or a
so,
little bit further west.
yeah, okay, so west, rather, west. Yeah, so that's the current entrance right there.
Oh,
You
looks
know,
pretty flat.
It looks pretty flat to me, but then again, like I said, it's hard to tell sometimes with this street view because,
It's a
I
wide
think-
angle camera, yeah.
yeah, a little bit hard to tell.
You know, this is going way beyond what we were, you know, looking into in conservation, but with all the development that's happening on Mountain View and the amount of traffic and, you know, the curb cuts and the, you know, bicycles that are trying to, you know, sidewalks and where does that all come into? Is that DRB or planning or
Yeah,
who's
that's,
going to be responsible for that?
the DRB will review the impacts to traffic and access and, you know,
With comment from
connectivity,
Public
all
Works
that.
too.
Yes,
Because I
Right.
remember the development on the other side of the road that came last year. They were told that their road had to come directly across from the Trinity,
right, so right
right,
here.
right there. So they weren't creating all these accesses.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, go ahead.
So sorry, I need to run to another meeting, but just I saw in the minutes, so after I had to leave last meeting, a conversation about whether or not the biologists or whoever hired by the developers provide a fair assessment, whether it's habitat or wetlands. And I was just, you know, thinking about that and wondering if something for conversation, and something else for conversation would be if we adopt a model where the applicants submit some sort of a fee to the town that's on par with what they would normally pay, and the town actually solicits the assessor for habitat or wetlands. So it's more
Yep.
managed by the
It-
town.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
sorry if I missed that whole conversation. You
that's
already had it,
exactly
but-
the kind of thing we were talking about, Eric, is, and I think what we decided was Melinda is gonna kind of put a feeler out there to other planners to find out, you know, are other towns also concerned about that dynamic?
Yep, great. And then the other point I want to bring up for conversation is, which I also brought up earlier in the meeting, was when we were looking at that second smaller parcel today, and that minimum acreage size. I feel like that actually worked in the opposite, it worked against what we were trying to do. And Terry had a good observation about the site. I thought the location and siting of the building envelope. So I thought it might be good for us to revisit that bylaw at some point, that perhaps we can build some flexibility in there for certain situations like one we experienced today.
Yep.
I also need to move on to a work meeting, Laura.
Oh, you're muted.
You're muted.
Oh, how about now?
Adjourn the meeting. Yep.
Oh, I also need to move on to a work meeting, Laura, just heads up.
Okay, thanks.
All
Yeah.
right,
let's
thank you all.
adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.